Welcome to the Operatory podcast, the podcast about burying the dinosaurs in dentistry. Moving past outdated technology and procedures to find a better way. With me, as always, is the man, the myth, the Dave Pryor, making me laugh, thank you, and providing the patient perspective, as you always do, my friend.
Hey, Brian, how's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. And we are just entering fall here in Minneapolis.
Yep.
Maybe this podcast will go I'll air a little bit later, but my guess is summer's dead, which makes me sad.
It makes us all sad.
Yeah, especially Minnesota. Like those people in Arizona right now are laughing at us, but you know, it's gloomy, it's cold, and it makes me reflect.
Okay.
Not like a mirror reflect, Dave, but I look backwards in time and think, old Grandpa Laskin's done a few things in the practice, and I was thinking about it, like, what could I bring to our listening audience who actually works on teeth every day from a clinical fashion that would be valuable. And one of the things that dentists always talk to me about, because I've done a lot of CAD/CAM restorations, a lot of crowns, and the last time I checked, number one, in your head.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so I've done over 40,000 CAD/CAM indirect restorations. So let's just call them crowns. So 40,000 crowns, and I put together, because somebody asked me, what are the top 5 things that you learned from doing 40,000 crowns, CAD/CAM crowns? I've done more than that, but at sort of a high level and talking to people, and what are the top 5 lessons that you've learned? Okay, you're looking at me like, what am I going to add to this?
Yeah, well,
right?
I certainly don't expect to be able to add a lot, but let's bring it.
I think you will, because you always do, and the patient perspective here is vital, because I think people could be hearing this, right? And we know that there's this big learning-doing gap, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody on planet Earth can learn something and go, that makes sense. But actually applying it is a totally different deal. And so having an outside perspective like your own on this, very valuable.
Okay.
Makes sense? So that's what I'm going to task you with today, my friend.
Okay.
So number 1 of the top 5 lessons learned from doing 40,000 crowns. Number 1, teeth are not snowflakes.
Oh, well, then I'm going to go with, since I live in Minnesota, they're not all alike.
Oh, man, yes, you're right. Yes, so teeth are not snowflakes. So what that means is that prep the same way every time. It sounds sort of simplistic, but like most things, the beauty's in its simplicity, right? I've worked with dentists where they look at every tooth and they think, how am I going to do this tooth today? With this unique strand of enamel and amalgam and dentin, how am I going to do it this time? Well, I can tell you after doing 40,000, they're not that different. Do it the same way every time. Work your systems. We have systems that we teach people on with an Upgrade Dental. We have a course on how to efficiently prepare teeth for for all ceramics, CAD/CAM ceramics, and it takes less than 2 minutes. But maybe you don't like my way, maybe you've got your own way, whatever it is. But I would urge people, think of it, how do I do it consistently the same way every time? Because that simplicity leads to 2 gigantic, wonderful things. Predictability, which is good, everybody wants that, and efficiency, which is good, and everybody wants that. So what that means is higher quality and more production. So more profitable and higher quality care, right? Which everybody should strive for.
You are the Henry Ford of dentistry.
I don't know how to take that, but I don't think I'm the first person to say this, but what I've seen is that lots of other dentists don't think of it from that perspective. So number 1, teeth aren't snowflakes. Okay. Number 2, it's not a dental term. Measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
Right? The prep that we talked about in number 1, teeth aren't snowflakes, and I talked about prep, but really I'm talking about the entire procedure, right? Yeah. That crown is no different than the last crown. You know, maybe there's every once in a while there's something that pops up. Maybe there's a pulp horn that you didn't think was there, whatever it is, but or that decay was 3 times larger. But you know, whatever it is, those are the rarities. Let's focus on the general rule that teeth are not snowflakes, and that means that you should measure twice, cut once, and the prep is that's the reason why I talk the prep in number 1, because it is the most crucial part of the equation. It is simple to do, but incredibly crucial to do, as perfect as possible. That depth of ceramic in the central fissure, and now I'm not talking your language, my man, but hopefully I'm talking to some people.
I get it.
It's simple. You need 2 millimeters of Kleenex. So depending if you don't do this, you'll need 2 millimeters of Kleenex. But if you do it correctly, you have 2 millimeters of clearance. Thank you. Of preparation, so that you can have at least 1.5 millimeters of good ceramic in that central fissure. This is not with some of the like zirconias where you need to have a different depth, but you still there's criteria that you don't sort of follow, you have to follow, and you don't break them, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not a snowflake, and the most crucial piece of it is to cut once, right? Keep measuring, because everything else that follows is crucial based on the preparation. I think that dentists think, ooh, my material will make up for my preparation. My bonding will. Nothing makes up for a bad prep. You make up for a bad prep. So measure twice, cut once.
That makes sense.
Number 3, the biggest barrier in your quality of care sits 6 inches above where you're working, right? Think about this. People, when we're talking about preparations and we're talking about doing crowns and we're talking about things aren't snow, I'm gonna make these procedures. What's going to mess it up? It's not the fact that there's a bigger amalgam or there's bleeding that you can't manage. All of these things that people think about as the variables when they're going through a course and how am I going to create how to do crowns, right? You can come up with the answers. There's one big variable that you, me, the assistant cannot plan for all of the time, and that's the brain attached to the human that I'm doing the work on, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing that's going to throw a wrench in the system. If you took the most difficult crown that you've ever done, but that patient was sedated and their mouth was open like a typodont, right? Not so hard anymore, right? So after you design your system, right, and you measure twice, make sure you have a good experience for the patient and you have all of the things like we talk about with therapeutic virtual reality with Opera VR. Manage the patient's brain, manage their anxiety. That's the biggest piece. Whatever you can do to manage anxiety, it's going to increase your level of care, right? People don't think about that factor enough. Make sense?
Yep.
Number 4, the number 1 reason for a crown being horrible is that the patient hasn't paid for it yet.
Okay.
So what do I mean by that?
I have no idea.
What that means is that, and every dentist knows as soon as I said what that means, right? People come back and they complain for things that they haven't paid for yet. Once it's paid for, then they're fine. So financial arrangements,
yes,
right? If you don't have good financial arrangements and people come back and complain, guess who's not paying for the crown? Right. The patient. If you have had good financial arrangements that you followed up with, the patient paid for it, you can adjust it, you can do whatever. And the patient, it's really more about the patient mentality on the back end with buyer's remorse, is what you call with the car or whatever it is. The difference is you can't go bring home a new Corvette and then go, do I want to pay for this thing? Right? That happens in dentistry all of the time. So financial arrangements are key. It's one of those things like when we're talking about after doing 40,000 crowns, what are the problems? You don't think about patient anxiety. You don't think about making good financial arrangements.
Well, okay. So I will throw something in here now. So what is your idea of a perfect financial arrangement so that you don't run into this problem?
Managed by somebody else because I suck at it is the real answer. But really it's just having an agreement with the patient of how this is going to get paid for, right? And having that planned ahead of time, which sounds basic, but isn't being done across the country, right?
Yep.
So just like measuring twice, making sure you have enough occlusal clearance, and people who are listening may really, what I would challenge people is like, do you really have this licked? Are you really doing financial arrangements every single time? When that patient comes in with a chipped tooth and you're like, I'll just do the crown. Do you pause and do financial arrangements, right? Because that's a key piece of the puzzle. Managing people's anxiety is a key piece of the puzzle that once you recognize that teeth aren't snowflakes, you develop your system, right? Once you do your, before you do your prep, make sure that the patient isn't anxious and make sure you have financial arrangements, right? You can use, if you want to use zirconia, go for it. If you want to use lithium disilicate, fantastic. If you want to use a PFM or a gold crown and you think that's appropriate, go at it. But make sure you have financial arrangements and that the patient's not freaking out while you're doing it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Let me ask you this. How often do people provide dental care based on the wallet of the patient?
Well, presenting, did you say present?
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time. Me and myself included, right? It's easy to fall into that trap.
Yeah.
To go, to project my value system onto you or think that I know what what your value system is. It's just, it's very hard not to do, frankly, because we're human beings, right? And so it happens all of the time. Diagnosing people's wallet is maybe a different flavor of not having financial arrangements, or maybe not appropriate financial arrangements, to just diagnose what's ideal and then options from there.
Yeah.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
Great point. I think your intuition is correct that that's another way to look at the number one reason for Crown being horrible is that patient hasn't paid for it. Right. Financial arrangements, not diagnosing the patient's wallet. Those to me are they're part of the same sport, sure. Right? Yeah. We're talking the same thing. Yeah, exactly. Okay. But frankly, it's just fun to say the number one reason for Crown being horrible is that the patient hasn't paid for it yet. Because you see it all the time. Oh. I don't see people complaining about stuff that they paid for. That's really what it comes down to, right?
Well, but as a new dentist, I think that's really valuable information. Because it probably took you a long time to come to that conclusion, and I'm sure for a seasoned veteran like yourself, it's obvious. But for somebody that's new to dentistry, I think that is a really valuable piece of information. And you're taking it off the cuff, but I think it'd be really helpful for a lot of people.
Oh, I can tell you, having written these 5 lessons, I feel value reading them.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is not. These lessons aren't things that I'm 100% batting 100% on. Right. These are things that I have to remind myself all of the time because it's just part of doing dentistry. Dentistry's hard. Right. There's challenges, and these are the top 5 lessons where I'm like, okay, what do all of us, myself included, need to keep in mind when we're doing these restorations, right? Efficiency, this isn't about walking in. Sometimes a dentist will identify with me on this. You walk in to a patient, and because of what's happening 6 months, 6 inches above the teeth, this patient, you're thinking this is going to be a horrible experience, right? So then I have to remind myself, well, guess what? That tooth is not a snowflake. Just because the brain might be a snowflake, the tooth is not. So let's manage the brain. Let's treat the tooth like a snowflake. And it's things that I tell myself too, right? You're exactly right. And so this isn't I guess what I'm saying is that you're right. And a new dentist, I think it would be valuable. But I do think that for those of us seasoned dentists, it doesn't hurt to remind ourselves, right? Yeah. So we've gone through the top 4, which is teeth not snowflakes, measure twice, cut once. The biggest barrier in the quality of our care lies 6 inches above where we're working, patient's anxiety. The number one reason for a crown being horrible is the patient hasn't paid for it yet. And I'm going to add Dave's great point, don't diagnose people's wallet, diagnose their condition. And number 5 is the best time to do a crown is now, right?
Yeah.
right now. And I think people know, they hear about same-day dentistry, but this is what I call same-day service. Same-day dentistry, we talked a bit before on this podcast that I trained CAD CAM for quite a while, so it's like the same day you prep the tooth, you put the permanent restoration on. Big fan. What I'm talking about is something different. When you diagnose it, you do it. And there's gigantic benefits in that. Number one is case acceptance. You know, strike while the iron's hot, right? And with that, if I tell you that tooth is broken, you need a crown, you're more likely to do it today than tomorrow, right? So make your financial arrangements, right? Number one reason for them being horrible is that it's not paid for. So make your financial arrangements, but then do it today. And when you do it today, a couple huge things happen. Reducing bacterial load, possibility of this getting worse, right? So you're actually elevating care by doing it today. There has been many a time my mom had to have a tooth extracted because she needed to have a root canal. And between the time that we treatment planned and she came in to have it done, the tooth fractured in half and had to come out. So today's better, right?
Yeah.
Number two is it dramatically reduces anxiety. That problem that sits 6 inches above our teeth. If I tell you need to have a crown today, and I'm like, oh, well, we're going to do it right now. You don't have time to be anxious. If you go home and say, hey, Dave, I'm having a crown done Tuesday, and you go, well, holy crap, the last one I did hurt for a month, right? Then anxiety starts spiking, and then you've got to manage number three, which is that brain and anxiety, right? Yep. So that's basically the top lessons that I learned from doing 40,000 crowns. Number one, teeth aren't snowflakes. Prep the same time every time. Treat teeth like it's a procedure that you do 40,000 times. Number two, measure twice, cut once. The prep is the most crucial part of the equation, period. Number three, the biggest barrier in the quality of your care lies 6 inches above the teeth. It's patient's anxiety. So manage that. Number four, the biggest reason why crowns are horrible is that they haven't been paid for yet. And number five, the best time to do a crown is now. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bryan.